Jesus said if you want to follow Him, you need to love one another. So how do you get better at following Jesus? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today on Journey at Home. What does it mean to follow Jesus? That's a question we spend a lot of time talking about here at Journey Church. Every week we remind people that we are here. Our mission is to inspire people to follow Jesus. So everything we do around here, whether online or in person, is designed to help people do just that. But what does that mean? What does it mean to follow Jesus? Well, Matt has taught on this before, but we keep teaching and defining what it means to follow Jesus because while it seems pretty obvious, it's so easy to get distracted away from it. Jesus defined it very clearly Himself. In the first century, there was a word they used to describe someone who followed. It was the word disciple. And Jesus actually told us how you know if someone is a disciple of His, there's a way to do that. So just before His arrest, Jesus sat down with His disciples and said, "Hey guys, if you don't get anything else I say, do this. Don't miss this. Don't ignore this." And what He explains is something that if you're not a Jesus follower, it really isn't expected of you, but it's at the heart of why the Christians you know sometimes frustrate you. So in John chapter 13, Jesus told them this. It's actually in verse 34. He says, "A new command I give you, love one another." To which we all go, "Well, that's nothing new. Jesus, I hate to break it to you, but people who don't even believe in you believe in love one another." But He says, wait, I'm not done. You don't get it yet. Let me define what that means. "So as I have loved you," He says, "so you must love one another." Oh, well, I'm not sure I want to sign up for that. I mean, Jesus, you set the bar just a little high. I mean, I might even call it a little bit extreme because you didn't just teach people to love their enemies, you actually did it. And you didn't just teach people to serve other people, you committed your life to serving other people. And you didn't just teach us to lay down life for others, you keep saying that you're going to lay down your life for us. So that kind of love carries a pretty steep price tag. I'm not sure I want to follow you there. Well, then He delivers this final definitive statement. In verse 35, He says, "By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, my followers, if you love one another." In other words, don't fool yourself into thinking they know you follow me because your mama or your grandmama was a Christian or because you show up at church some weekends or you have a Bible verse hanging on your wall at home or you listen to Christian music. No, according to Jesus, the distinguishing mark of a disciple is your sacrificial, supernatural love for one another. The kind of love that doesn't just serve when it's convenient or will work out best for me in the long run or sporadically or occasionally. No, you're a disciple when your love, the love for who you are, what you do, because Jesus is at work in and through you. For those of you who don't follow Jesus or you're not sure where you stand or you just don't like church, this is the big reason why, isn't it? Because you've spent too much time with Christians who want to talk about Jesus, but they don't want to love like Jesus. They point out all the ways you don't live like Jesus, but they don't look anything like Jesus themselves. And you don't expect perfection, but you figure we should at least be loving a little bit better than we are. And you're right. But it's not easy. I mean, just think about this. It takes a lot of work and a lot of maturity to learn how to love like Jesus did, which is why a lot of us have a relationship with Jesus, but we don't love like Jesus very well because we're still practicing. And why is it so hard to love like this? Well, I think you're going to agree. Other people are weird. Other people say strange things and believe very different things from me. And they live their lives based on very odd values and things I'd never use as reasons or motivation to do anything. I mean, there are some people who actually think that Android phones are better than an iPhone. I mean, what? I mean, they never separate their darks from their lights in the wash. And they voted for the most ridiculous candidate on the last ballot. I mean, if it weren't for other people, this following Jesus thing would be pretty easy. Now, I know you know that I'm exaggerating and making jokes, but think about what Jesus said was the way to tell if someone is following Him. It's loving one another. And we often focus on the loving part, but today I just want to focus on the one another part. Now, Jesus' first followers took this so seriously that when Paul and Peter and John and James wrote the documents that we now call the New Testament, all they did was provide commentary on how to love God and love one another. Because they understood that this was what Jesus intended to be the primary activity of the church. The primary activity of the church is not what we're doing right now, basically listening and thinking about Jesus. The primary activity of the church isn't learning how to think about God correctly, although that's important. The primary activity of the church is to one another. I mean, think about the other activities that we often think about as central to the activity of the church. We don't get a lot of detail about these in those documents. And here's what I mean. These writers talk about celebrating communion together, but they don't tell us how often to do it. They talk about singing together, but they give us no directive about what songs to sing or how many songs we should sing when we get together or how loud the music should be or shouldn't be or what style it should be. They talk about sermons, but they say nothing about how long they should be or the best style or approach to teaching. On the other hand, there are tons of passages that talk about how to love one another. I mean, what's central to following Jesus is loving God by loving your neighbor like Jesus loves you, and the New Testament is full of detail about how to do that. Matter of fact, there are over 50 specific examples about how we should love one another. So let me show you one specific passage from a letter Paul wrote to the Christians in Rome that details several specific ways to fulfill this central command from Jesus. In Romans 12, Paul writes this, "Be devoted to one another in love." Well, that sounds pretty familiar. Being devoted sounds like making a commitment. Like you've got to make a decision to do it. Like it takes some sort of focus and energy, and then it won't be easy. I bet Paul had some folks he had trouble loving as well. So be devoted. And then Paul says, honor one another above yourselves. Wait, Paul, love means I make their needs more important than my own? Can't we just all pick some songs we all like to sing together once a week and that be enough? And then there are a few lines later he writes this, share with the Lord's people who are in need. Practice hospitality. This isn't really rocket science, is it? Loving someone means helping them and sharing and showing them hospitality. It's about showing that person they matter, and then you are with them through it all. So how do you learn to love this way? Because it doesn't come naturally. How do you develop this kind of love? Well, you can't love one another without doing life with one another. You can't one another. You can't love one another unless you're doing life with one another. You sure can't do it fully just watching this message online. You just can't. Now you get one anothered when you watch here, or you listen on a podcast, or you attend a service on Sunday. See, there are a bunch of volunteers who one another you when they create this video, or create the graphics that you see, or when you come to the Force Center and come in person, there are all kinds of people who one another you by preparing the space for you and greeting you and engaging your kids so that they want to come back. But you can't one another just sitting at home, not knowing anyone. And you can't do these things well with people you occasionally see or people you periodically pass. It's just impossible. It takes intentional relationships to practice loving one another. The kind of relationships where you are invested for a period of time and committed to loving those people when it's good and when it's bad, when it's easy and when it's ugly. If you're not intentional about choosing a few people to love this way, when things get hard, you'll lean away. You'll slip out the back door and walk away from the mess, but that doesn't teach you how to love. This is why Matt says from time to time that circles are better than rows. Because you need a circle of people, a small group of people outside of your family who you consistently do life with. When you are in a circle with a few one another's every week, and you make group life part of your routine, you actually are able to do what a Christian should be known for doing. You're known by a few, and you get to know a few, which gives you an opportunity to forgive when it's hard, and accept when it's difficult, and care for and encourage when it's tough, and submit when you want to be selfish. You can't do that stuff at the level Jesus asks if you're not diving deep doing life with a few people because you don't know when they need it. You don't know what's going on in their world. You have no idea how they need to be cared for. You don't know if they're starting to drift and need restoring. You're clueless about whether this past week was full of struggles or successes for them. And I don't know either, but if you ask me what's been going on in the life of the guys in my group, I can tell you because they're the neighbors I'm going deep with. They're the one another's I'm practicing this loving one another stuff with. And you can't love one another without doing life with one another. It's just impossible. You can love people you cross paths with, and you should, But that's not how you practice developing the love Jesus is talking about, because that's short term. When you do life with people, you're committing to the long term. Stick it out, no matter how hard it gets, kind of love, just like you have in your family. These are the relationships that require submitting when it's not easy, forgiving when it's painful, restoring when it's tough, bearing with and carrying burdens when it's tiring, but that's how your love grows. Circles are where you have these relationships that let you ask tough questions and pray for each other and figure out what in the world the sermon was talking about on Sunday and whether you need to practice it or not in your life. That's why I'm convinced that if you're not in a group, you're probably missing what it means to be the church, because this isn't the church. Church doesn't happen in rows or with your face glued to a screen. Church happens in circles. Now, I know you're busy and your schedule's crazy and you have very little free time. I get that. But I also know that you probably spend a lot of time just watching YouTube or Netflix or scrolling social media. So here's what you need to do. You need to find some people in your life to practice one anothering one another. If you're watching locally, we've got some ways to help you to do just that. First, you should come visit us on Sundays at the Force Center and let us serve you in person. Come by the suite and meet our wonderful team there. Meet me, meet Matt. Just make an introduction of yourself. Or if you're actually ready to get to know some other folks and figure out if they're the kind of people you want to be with, sign up for one of our Wednesday workshops that will take place each Wednesday night in September from 7 to 8 p.m. at the Force Center. We've got a women's workshop, men's workshop, and a couples workshop. Come spend some time studying some great content and starting some new relationships that have the potential to grow you into a disciple, a follower of Jesus. Simply register by going to journeycallaway.com/register and getting all the details about those workshops. Because listen, a Christian is someone who loves God by loving their neighbor like God loves them. That's why the primary activity of the church is to one another. But you can't do that sitting in rows. You need to be in circles. So don't settle for just a little of what it means to be a Christian. Experience what Jesus intended and invites us all to experience. Do life with a few people and see what He does in and through you.